On Saturday morning, I was getting ready for work, distracted by the usual rush of trying to get everything done in time. But as I reached for my toothbrush, I noticed something odd. Her toothbrush, not the usual white one, but a bright green one. For a moment, I wondered if I had made a mistake, maybe bought her a new one without realizing it. But no, this wasn't mine. Jane always uses white and I always use blue. There was no doubt about it. I stared at the green toothbrush for what felt like forever, as if it were accusing me of something. But I didn't ask right away. Jane had left that morning, saying she needed a weekend away. "I need to breathe," she had told me, her voice soft, almost fragile. She said she was going to her sister's cabin to be alone for a bit, to clear her head. "I can't breathe in this house anymore," she added, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. She spoke like it wasn't about me, or about work, just about the house, about the space between us. It felt strange, the way she phrased it, so distant, like something was off. But I didn't ask her about it either. I just nodded, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease inside me. I didn't want to confront her. Maybe I should have. Maybe I should have asked her then and there, "What do you mean? Why do you need to leave?" But instead, I pushed it aside. She had always been someone who needed time alone, someone who would occasionally retreat to herself when the world felt too loud. At least, that's what I told myself. I didn't know exactly what she meant by breathe, but I assumed it was just the stress of life piling up. Work, responsibilities, the daily grind. Everyone felt that way at some point, didn't they? Still, it felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something she wasn't telling me. As I moved into the kitchen, something else caught my eye. 2 wine glasses on the counter. Not just any wine glasses. One of them had a lipstick mark on it. We didn't even drink red wine. I always preferred beer, and she would always complain about getting a headache from it. I couldn't remember the last time we had red wine together, and yet here were 2 glasses, one stained with lipstick. I felt my stomach drop as the weight of the situation started to sink in. My mind raced as I looked at the glasses. Why would she have red wine? Why would there be a lipstick mark? We didn't drink red wine. She didn't like it, and I couldn't remember the last time we'd shared a bottle, even if we had a bottle of it stashed in the pantry. I glanced at the glass again, feeling as though it was mocking me. A clue, a symbol of something I wasn't ready to face. I tried to push the thoughts aside, but they lingered, gnawing at the edges of my consciousness. I moved closer, picking up the glasses, examining the lipstick mark. It wasn't just a faint trace. It was clear, a deliberate print, an impression that could only have been left by a person who had drank from that glass. Who was here? I thought, and then immediately, I tried to shake the thought from my head. Maybe she had a friend over. A female friend who liked wine, perhaps. But no, I couldn't get past the feeling that something wasn't right. My mind was working in overdrive now, and I knew I was starting to suspect the worst. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but I kept returning to the lipstick mark. Her lipstick was always the same shade, something subtle, not too bold. She had bought a new tube of it a few months ago, but I had never seen her wear it much. She liked to keep things low-key. She liked to stay simple. But then, the thought crossed my mind again. Who else could have used the lipstick? Who else could have left the mark on her glass? I suddenly felt sick to my stomach. What was happening in my life? What was going on with Jane? Was I being paranoid? Was I seeing things that weren't really there? I set the glasses down with trembling hands, trying to calm myself. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than I was being told. I could feel the tension in the air, like something had shifted between us, though we hadn't spoken about it. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. Jane had left hours ago. It was too early for her to be up at her sister's cabin, so I hadn't heard from her. I wasn't expecting her to call, but I had hoped she'd text or maybe let me know when she arrived. I'd been used to that, a quick text, a little check-in, something to make sure we both knew we were thinking about each other. But the silence now felt different, like she was hiding from me. I stared at my phone for a few more seconds, then turned it face down on the counter. I didn't want to look at it. That's when I noticed something else. I didn't want to acknowledge it at first, But it was there, too. The air in the house felt different. Jane had been distant for a while, but now it felt colder, like something was missing, something I couldn't quite name. It was as if she had retreated into herself, but instead of being gentle with her space, I was locked out of it. I couldn't reach her, and that feeling of distance, of separation, hung in the air like a shadow. I tried to focus on the tasks at hand, getting my things together for work. But the thoughts kept coming back over and over again. What was I missing? Why was this all starting to feel so wrong? Why was I standing here in a house that felt foreign to me, with no answers and too many questions? The last clue came when I was about to head out the door. Jane had left her makeup bag on the bathroom counter, the same one she always used. But when I looked inside, I noticed a small bottle of perfume that I didn't recognize. It was one of those expensive brands you only buy when you want to impress someone. It wasn't the kind she'd ever wear. I knew it because I had bought her perfume before, the one she wore every day. It had become as familiar to me as the sound of her voice, and this bottle was different. I reached out, grabbing it without thinking. My fingers brushed the label, and it struck me. It wasn't hers. It wasn't a scent she would ever wear. And it certainly wasn't something she'd pick up for herself. I stared at it for a moment, the bottle cold in my hand. Then the question popped into my head, one I wasn't ready to ask myself. Who else had she been trying to impress? I put the bottle down quickly, trying to make sense of it. I felt my heart race. My thoughts were spinning out of control. But no matter how much I tried to deny it, the pieces were fitting together. There were too many signs now, too many things I couldn't explain away. The green toothbrush, the lipstick mark, the unfamiliar perfume. They weren't accidents. They weren't just coincidences. I wasn't imagining this. Jane was hiding something from me. I had to know what was going on. I couldn't leave it like this. I didn't confront her right away. No, that would have been too easy. Instead, I told myself I'd wait for her to come back. I'd wait to hear her explanation. I wanted to believe her, to give her a chance to explain. But deep down, I knew the truth already. Something was off, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, an uncomfortable sensation sitting in the pit of my stomach. The more I thought about it, the more everything seemed off. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started replaying her behavior from the past few weeks in my mind, trying to find something, anything, that could explain what I was feeling. The pattern of her actions became clearer, more undeniable, and I couldn't avoid it. She had been different. It started small at first, little changes that might have seemed innocent if I weren't looking so closely. She had been talking a lot about needing to find herself. I had tried to be understanding. We had been together for years, and it wasn't unusual for someone to feel a little lost, to need a break. But then she started talking about how the house felt too tight. Those words haunted me, lingering in my thoughts like an echo. I didn't understand what she meant. It was just a house, our home. How could it feel tight? I had brushed it off as a passing mood. I told myself it was just the stress of everything going on, work, life, and that we all went through phases like that. She had always been more sensitive to her surroundings, needing space and time alone. She had gone on a weekend retreat before to get away and clear her head. I didn't think much of it then, but the more she talked about needing time to breathe, the more the words began to sound like something else. A need for distance, a need to escape. I started to wonder if it was me she needed to escape from. Every time she came back from one of these trips, everything would seem normal again. She would act like nothing had happened, as if the air between us hadn't shifted. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was changing between us, that she was holding something back. She became evasive, hiding behind vague metaphors. I started noticing other little things that unsettled me. Her phone was always on silent. She would glance at it constantly, and when she thought I wasn't looking, she would quickly swipe the screen to turn it off. I had never cared about her phone before, but now I couldn't help but wonder if there was something she was hiding. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People have their own space, their own privacy. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that her behavior had shifted. She wasn't acting like herself. She had become more distant, and when I would ask her something personal, she would always change the subject. I was starting to doubt my own instincts. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking things. After all, she was still coming home every night, still sleeping beside me. There were no obvious signs of anything wrong. But then I started noticing the little things, the things that didn't add up. She was acting distant. Her laughter felt forced, like she was faking it. The smile she gave me didn't reach her eyes anymore. And when we talked, she seemed distracted, almost as if she were somewhere else. Sometimes, when I'd ask her about her day, she would answer briefly and then change the subject. She would get up quickly, as if trying to avoid the conversation altogether. It wasn't like her. I tried to talk to her about it. I had to know what was going on, had to hear her say that everything was fine. But whenever I tried to ask her about what was happening, she would respond with a laugh or a vague answer. "You're overthinking it," she'd say. "Nothing's wrong." But I wasn't convinced. The more she told me not to worry, the more I found myself spiraling. Why couldn't she just answer my questions? Why did she keep dodging me? It was like she was pulling away more with each passing day, and I had no idea why. Her answers weren't satisfying me anymore. I needed the truth. It all came to a head one evening when she came home later than usual. She had said she was working late, finishing up some projects at the office. But something about her demeanor seemed different. She was quieter than usual, almost distant, and she had that same uneasy smile on her face. I tried to make small talk, but she wasn't having it. She answered my questions with short responses, barely looking at me. The more I pressed, the more withdrawn she became, and that old feeling of being left out of her world crept back into my mind. I told myself that I was being paranoid, but the truth was becoming harder to ignore. There was something else going on. She had become more secretive, more closed off. Her stories were inconsistent, and her answers didn't add up. I started thinking about all the times she had left for weekends away, about the trips she had taken. The vague explanations, the excuses that didn't quite fit. How many times had she needed space? How many times had she needed to breathe? And why did I always just accept it without asking the questions that now seemed so obvious? I wasn't stupid. Something was happening. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that she was lying to me, that she was hiding something. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that it was just a rough patch, that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew better. The next few days passed in a blur. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't focus at home. I was preoccupied with the growing unease inside me, the suspicion that kept gnawing at me, tugging at my thoughts. I knew there was something I was missing. I started replaying our conversations, the moments when she had been evasive, the way she would dodge certain topics. It was as if she was hiding something, something she didn't want me to know. I tried to distract myself with other things, but the thoughts kept coming back. I thought about the lipstick mark on the wine glass, the unfamiliar scent of perfume. I thought about the toothbrush, the green one, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was looking at a piece of a puzzle. A puzzle I didn't want to put together, because I was afraid of what the finished picture would look like. One night, I came home early from work, hoping to catch her off guard, hoping that maybe I could get some answers. I had to know. I couldn't keep living in this fog of uncertainty. But when I walked into the house, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. Her suitcase was sitting on the floor by the door. It wasn't packed neatly, but it was there, open, with clothes scattered inside. There was no note, no explanation. Just the suitcase, sitting there, like an unanswered question. I felt my heart sink as I approached it. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I went through the suitcase quickly, my hands shaking as I rifled through her clothes, looking for something, anything, that could explain what was going on. And that's when I found it. Tucked between her clothes, there was a small envelope. I opened it carefully, my hands trembling. Inside, there was a note, a date, and an address, a hotel. I didn't need to read the rest. I knew what it meant. I didn't confront her that night. Couldn't. I needed time to process everything. But the next day, when she came home, I saw the truth in her eyes. She didn't try to hide it. She didn't offer an excuse or a lie. She just looked at me, her face calm, as if nothing had changed. The silence between us was deafening. She didn't try to defend herself. She didn't try to explain. And I realized, as I looked at her, that she had already crossed that line. And now there was no going back. The day after I found the hotel receipt, I spent most of my time in a daze. I couldn't focus on anything, my mind racing with thoughts of what I had just discovered. I had found the proof I needed, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the end. An ending that I couldn't stop, no matter how much I wanted to. She had already crossed the line, and I knew there was no going back. But I didn't confront her that day. Couldn't. I didn't know how to say the words that were swirling around in my mind. There was a part of me that still didn't want to believe it. I kept asking myself, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm misinterpreting this? What if there's another explanation? But deep down, I knew. I knew what the note meant. I knew what it was pointing to. The affair wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was the truth. That night, she came home late as usual, her steps light but purposeful. The silence between us felt heavy, like the air was thick with everything that had been left unsaid. I could tell she knew that something was different, that something had shifted. But she didn't ask about the suitcase, about the hotel receipt. She didn't say anything at all. I tried to act normal, to pretend like everything was fine, but it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I was living in a house with a woman I thought I knew, but now I wasn't so sure. Every step she took, every glance she gave me, felt like a reminder that she was hiding something, that she had already made her choice. I watched her as she walked into the living room, setting down her bag, kicking off her shoes. She smiled faintly, but it wasn't the same smile. It wasn't the smile of the woman I'd known for so long. There was something colder, something more distant in her expression. She was pulling away, and I was starting to feel like an outsider in my own life. "Hi," she said softly, not meeting my gaze. She sat down on the couch, her hands in her lap. She looked exhausted, but I wasn't sure if it was from the trip or from keeping up the charade. "Hey," I replied, my voice steady, but the words felt hollow in my mouth. "How was your weekend?" She sighed, brushing her hair back behind her ear. "It was good. Needed the break, you know?" I nodded, my stomach sinking. "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "You seemed like you needed it." She glanced at me for a brief second, and then her eyes darted away, focusing on the floor. It was like she couldn't hold my gaze for more than a few moments. I could see the unease in her, and I wondered if she was waiting for me to say something, to confront her. But I didn't know where to begin. I didn't know how to start the conversation that had to happen, the conversation that would shatter everything. "I've been thinking," I began, my voice shaking slightly. "You've been distant lately, more than usual. You've been taking a lot of these weekends away. I don't get it. What's going on, Jane? What aren't you telling me?" She froze, her hand gripping the edge of the couch. She knew I was getting closer to the truth, but she didn't speak. The silence between us stretched on, thick with the tension that had built up over weeks, months, years. I could see her fingers tremble ever so slightly, but she still didn't say anything. "Jane," I said again, my voice quieter this time. "I found the note. I found the hotel receipt." She stiffened, her eyes flickering to me before quickly looking away. She didn't speak. She didn't try to deny it, didn't offer an excuse. She just sat there like a person who had already accepted their fate. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing as I waited for her to respond. But she didn't. The words I wanted to say, the things I needed to hear, were trapped inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to understand why this was happening, why she had chosen this path. But all I could do was sit there and wait for her to speak. Finally, she let out a long breath. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." I wanted to say something, to argue, to ask her why she hadn't told me, why she hadn't been honest. But I couldn't. The words felt empty, And the more she spoke, the more the reality of the situation sank in. "It wasn't about you, Mark," she continued, her voice shaking now. "It wasn't about us. I just needed something. I don't know what I was looking for, but it wasn't you. It wasn't what we had." Her words were like a slap to the face. I could feel my heart breaking, piece by piece, as she spoke. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about us. And in that moment I knew. I knew she had already made her choice. She had already crossed that line, and now there was no going back. I felt a numbness spread through me, like I was outside of my own body, unable to process the gravity of what she had just confessed. I wanted to leave, to get up and walk out the door, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, feeling the weight of the words she had just spoken, feeling the finality of it all. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice cold, the words barely audible. She closed her eyes, her hands clenching together as if she were trying to hold herself together. "It's Trevor. It was just an escape." I wasn't thinking straight. I wasn't thinking at all. I didn't know how to respond. Trevor. I had met him a few times. He worked at her company, one of her colleagues. I had never thought much of him. But now the thought of him, of the way he had been there with her in a way that I never was, made my stomach churn. "It was just a mistake," she added, her voice breaking. "It didn't mean anything, I swear. I just needed someone to talk to, someone to listen." The words felt like poison in my ears. Someone to listen? Was that what this had become? Was that what it had all been about? "I don't know how to fix this, Mark," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant to hurt you, but I have, haven't I?" I didn't answer her. Couldn't. I could barely breathe as the weight of her betrayal settled in. I had never expected this. Not from her. Not from Jane. And yet, here we were. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry." But the apology felt empty. It didn't change anything. The truth was out now, and nothing would ever be the same. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking, and walked to the door. I didn't look at her. I didn't say anything more. There was nothing left to say. The silence between us was deafening, and I knew that nothing could fill the space between us anymore. The door clicked shut behind me, and as I stepped into the hallway, I realized that my life had just changed forever. The weight of the truth hung on me like a heavy fog, and I didn't know where to go from here. But I knew one thing. The life I had known, the life I had shared with Jane, was over. The days following our confrontation felt like I was moving through a haze. Everything seemed distant, muffled, as if I were watching my own life unfold from outside my body. The house felt strange now, empty in a way that it had never felt before. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken words, of things left unsaid. I could feel Jane's presence in every room, but it was as if she was already gone. After I left the living room, after I had walked out without saying another word, everything changed. It wasn't just that we weren't talking. It was the distance, the chasm that had opened between us. The silence was suffocating. It was like I had become invisible in my own home. I was there physically, but emotionally, I might as well have been a ghost. I stopped sleeping in our bedroom. I couldn't bear the thought of lying next to her, of being in the same space where we had shared so many memories. Instead, I started sleeping on the couch, curled up in a ball, staring at the ceiling. The nights felt long and endless, filled with the echo of my own thoughts, the constant replaying of the conversation, of the things she had said. She didn't try to talk to me after that. She didn't reach out, not once. The silence between us became a wee *p*n. A wee *p*n she wielded, and a wee *p*n I had no choice but to bear. During the day, she would go about her routine like nothing had changed. She would prepare her breakfast, make her coffee, and move through the motions of life as though nothing was broken. She didn't look at me when she passed by, didn't speak unless it was necessary. There were no apologies, no attempts to explain herself, no pleas for understanding. It was as if she had already made her peace with everything, as if she had already accepted that this was how things were going to be from now on. And I couldn't do the same. I couldn't just let it go. Couldn't pretend that everything was fine. I couldn't walk through life like I didn't know what was happening. Every time I saw her, every time I heard her voice, the betrayal felt fresh, like it had just happened. I couldn't stop the hurt, couldn't stop the way it gnawed at my insides. But I also couldn't bring myself to confront her again. Not when I already knew everything there was to know. I had already seen her for who she truly was, and now I didn't know how to move forward from that. The days dragged on, and the silence between us became unbearable. I started to withdraw further. I stopped engaging in conversations. I stopped asking about her day or sharing about mine. I stopped caring about anything other than the weight of the betrayal that had broken my heart. I couldn't stand being in the same space as her, but I also couldn't bring myself to leave. I didn't want to run away, didn't want to face the reality of being without her. I felt trapped. Trapped by my own emotions, by my own anger, by the life we had built together that was now falling apart. There were moments when I would catch her looking at me, her gaze fleeting, almost as if she were waiting for me to say something, to do something. But I couldn't. I didn't know what to say anymore. What was there left to say? Everything had already been said. She was the one who had made the choice. She was the one who had made the decision to cross that line. I had given her everything, and she had taken it for granted. She had betrayed me in the worst way possible. And now there was nothing left between us but the silence that had become our new reality. Some nights, I would lie on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten here. How had we ended up like this? How had I ended up with a woman who had chosen someone else over me? How had I allowed myself to become this invisible, this irrelevant in her life? The questions swirled around in my mind, and I couldn't find the answers. I knew that she didn't care anymore. I knew that she had already checked out. She had already made her decision. The only question now was whether or not I could let go. Could I walk away? Could I leave everything behind and move on? Or was I just going to continue existing in this limbo, stuck in a life that no longer felt like mine? And then one day, I woke up and realized that I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living in this house, in this silence. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was okay when it wasn't. The truth was that I had already made my decision. I had already made up my mind, but I hadn't been ready to face it yet. I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. But the time had come. I gathered up my things that night, moving quietly through the house as if I were a stranger, gathering clothes, toiletries, anything I could carry. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to confront her, didn't want to have that conversation. What was the point? There was nothing left to say. I walked to the door, my bag in hand, and for a moment, I stood there, staring at the quiet house. The house that had once felt like home, the house where we had built a life together. And now it was just a place where two strangers coexisted, separated by walls and silence. I opened the door quietly, stepped out into the cool night air, and closed it behind me. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't leave a note. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a confrontation. I didn't want to make her think she could explain herself, could beg for forgiveness. It was too late for that. I knew that when I walked out that door, I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving her. I was leaving the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with everything, the woman who had broken me. And when I walked out into the night, I felt something strange. It wasn't relief, not yet. It wasn't freedom. It was just emptiness. The kind of emptiness that comes from realizing that the person you thought you knew is gone, and the life you had built is no longer yours to claim. I went to my mother's house that night. I didn't want to be alone, but I didn't want to be with her either. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing her again, not after everything that had happened. I couldn't be around her, not when the anger and the hurt were still so raw. When I got to my mother's house, I sat on the couch and stared at the walls, unsure of what to do next. The future seemed uncertain, like a path I couldn't see clearly. But what I did know was that I was done. I couldn't go back to that life. I couldn't go back to the woman who had betrayed me, to the house that no longer felt like home. It wasn't just that I was leaving her. I was leaving a version of myself behind, a version that had loved and trusted her. That version of me no longer existed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. The days after I left felt like an endless blur. I couldn't remember much about the moments that followed. I went through the motions, waking up in the quiet house that had once been filled with the sounds of our life together. Now everything felt like an echo. The house that had been our home for years was no longer mine. It was just a place I stayed, a place I needed to escape from. The walls didn't seem familiar anymore. The rooms didn't feel like they held any warmth, any connection. They were just rooms now. When I stayed at my mother's house, I didn't have to explain anything. She knew what had happened without me needing to say a word. My mother, ever perceptive, saw the hurt in my eyes. But she never asked about Jane, never asked what had transpired. I didn't need to relive it. I didn't need to talk about the details. My mother simply let me be, letting me sit in the quiet space, as if she knew that the silence would speak louder than any words could. I stayed there for a few nights, and those nights were a blur of thinking, trying to make sense of everything. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I hadn't just left the house. I had left a version of myself behind. I had left behind the man who trusted his wife, who thought she was the one, the woman who was his world, his partner, his everything. That man no longer existed, and in that moment of clarity, I realized that I wasn't just running from her. I was running from the life I had built with her, a life that no longer held any meaning. It was strange, the sense of loss. It wasn't just the woman I had loved, but the version of myself that had existed alongside her. The part of me that believed in us. That part of me was gone now. There was no going back. And as much as I wanted to fix it all, I knew it wasn't possible. I didn't contact Jane. I didn't try to reach out, and she didn't reach out to me. The silence between us was so thick that I almost felt like I couldn't breathe. Days turned into weeks, and the longer I stayed away, the more I realized that I couldn't go back. I wasn't sure what would happen if I went back. Would we try to talk through it? Would we try to fix it? No, the truth was we couldn't fix it. There was no fixing what had already been broken. The silence wasn't just between us. It was within me. I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I couldn't talk to my friends, my family, not about this. It felt like a betrayal to even speak about it. Like I was giving it more life than it deserved. I wanted to block it out of my mind, to pretend like it had never happened. But that wasn't possible. It had happened, and I had to live with it. But Jane? What was she doing? How was she coping with everything? I couldn't help but wonder. Was she pretending like everything was fine? Like nothing had happened? Was she moving on? I couldn't stop thinking about her, even though I knew I should. I had left her behind, but somehow she still haunted my thoughts. I couldn't stop wondering what she was doing, who she was with. Was she with Trevor now? Had he become the man she wanted, the man who could give her the space she claimed she needed? Had she found what she was looking for? The questions gnawed at me, but I didn't have the answers. And that was a part of the problem. The hardest part wasn't leaving her. It was learning to live without the life I had built around her. That life had been my world, and now it felt like it had been ripped away. There was a gaping hole where it used to be, a hole I didn't know how to fill. I could hear the echoes of our conversations, the laughter, the comfort of knowing that she was there. But now all I had was silence. And the silence was suffocating. I had tried to distract myself, tried to keep busy, but nothing seemed to work. I went through the motions, pretending to be fine, but inside I felt like I was falling apart. The sadness and the anger were constant companions, and I couldn't shake them. I knew I had made the right choice, but that didn't make it easier. Leaving her had been necessary, but it didn't stop the hurt. It didn't stop the brokenness that I carried with me every day. There was one day, about 2 weeks after I left, that I got a text from her. It was short, to the point, but it still hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Mark, I think we need to talk." The words echoed in my head for hours. I knew that I needed to respond. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding her forever. But what was there to say? What could she possibly say to me that would make this any better? I had already made my decision. I had already chosen to leave. I had already walked away from her and from everything we had. What could she say that would change that? I didn't respond right away. I sat with the message for a while, trying to figure out what to do. Was I ready to talk to her? Was I ready to face her again? In the end, I decided that I couldn't ignore it. I needed closure, even if it hurt. I needed to see her, to hear what she had to say. Not because I wanted to go back to her, not because I was hoping for reconciliation, but because I needed to understand why she had done this. I needed to hear her say it, to hear her admit what had happened. The next morning, I replied, "Where?" She gave me an address, a cafe in the center of town. The kind of place we used to go to when things were simpler. I wasn't sure what to expect when I walked into that cafe. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, but I knew that this conversation had to happen. It was the only way I could start moving forward. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a table near the window, a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore a pale blue sweater, something I didn't recognize. It was almost like she was a stranger, someone I didn't know. I stood there for a moment watching her, trying to muster the courage to walk over. But I didn't know if I could face her. The woman sitting in front of me wasn't the woman I had known for so long. She wasn't the woman I had trusted with my heart. No, she was a stranger, just like I was to her now. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, her eyes flicking to mine with a mix of apprehension and something else. Regret? Maybe. But it didn't matter. Not anymore. "Mark," she said, her voice soft, like she was afraid of breaking the silence. "I'm glad you came." I didn't respond right away. I just nodded and sat down across from her. The air between us was thick with everything we hadn't said. "I know this isn't easy," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." I stared at her, trying to keep my emotions in check. But I couldn't. I couldn't pretend that I wasn't still angry, still hurt. The words I wanted to say, the questions I wanted to ask, were all trapped inside me. "I don't know what to say, Jane," I said, my voice thick. "I don't know if there's anything you can say that would make this better." She closed her eyes briefly, then looked back at me. I know I can't fix this. But I want you to know that I never stopped caring about you. I never stopped loving you. I was just lost. I didn't know what I needed, and I ended up making all the wrong choices." Her words sounded rehearsed, like she had practiced them in front of a mirror. But it didn't matter. I had heard enough. The truth was clear, even if it hurt to hear. "I'm done, Jane," I said quietly, the finality in my voice unmistakable. "I can't go back to this. I can't go back to you." She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. Couldn't. "I know," she whispered. "I know. I wanted to say goodbye properly." And with that, I stood up and left. I didn't look back. When I returned home, I thought things would be different, that she would at least acknowledge the weight of what had happened. But she acted as if nothing had changed. She went about her day, making breakfast, talking like everything was fine. I sat there, listening to her, but feeling nothing. I didn't confront her, didn't ask about Trevor or the lies. I waited for her to admit something, but I realized she wouldn't. She was fine pretending it was all normal, and that made it worse. I had already lost myself in this marriage, but I wasn't ready to leave yet. The silence between us was all that remained, a painful reminder of what we had lost. One morning, I looked at her as she sliced oranges and said, "I know about Trevor." She didn't look shocked, just set down the knife. "I ended it. It wasn't love," she said. She admitted everything, but there was no sense of relief. We sat in silence, and she seemed ready to start over, but I wasn't sure if I could. After years of silence and deception, I knew I couldn't go back. I nodded, the weight of the decision heavy. For the first time, we truly talked, but I knew it was too late for us. The goodbye lingered in the air, and I walked away, knowing it was the last time we'd speak like this.